Tonight, let's drift into a few stories from the world of blockchain. Nothing technical, nothing stressful. Just soft, little tales for the quiet hours of the evening. If today felt a bit heavy, if your mind is still running in circles, you don't need to solve anything right now. You can simply lie down, take a slow breath, and let me tell you something easy, something calm, something a little strange, and hopefully something that helps you fall asleep. The world of blockchain may sound loud, full of charts, prices, urgency, and noise. But when the night settles and you open this old imaginary notebook with me, you'll find that beneath all the chaos, there are stories. Stories of people, coincidences, accidents, and little mysteries drifting quietly in the dark. Stories about losing things. Stories about things that somehow find their way back. Stories about creators who vanished. And stories about people who tried their best in places where almost nothing made sense. Some of these stories will sound familiar. Some will sound ridiculous. And some will sound like dreams we all had once and then forgot. But don't worry. Tonight isn't about understanding everything. It isn't about analysis or logic. It's simply about keeping you company while the world slows down around you. So if you're still awake, and it's perfectly fine if you're not, you can let your breathing settle, let your shoulders sink into the bed, and let the softness of the night carry you a little farther away from today. In a moment, we'll begin our first story, and if you fall asleep halfway through, that's completely okay. These stories will wait for you, just like a quiet friend sitting beside your bed, ready to pick up where we left off. Now, whenever you're ready, let's open the notebook and step into the first little tale of the night. Sometimes, in the world of blockchain, people lose things in ways that don't feel modern at all. Not like losing a password on a website or misplacing a document on your computer. The losses we're talking about tonight feel older, softer, almost like the quiet myths people used to tell about coins dropped into wells or letters carried away by the wind. They're not dramatic. They don't come with alarms or error messages. They simply drift out of reach, settling into a kind of digital twilight where they stay forever. And in their stillness, there's something almost soothing. Let's take our time with it. No rush. This is a nighttime story, after all. In the early days of Bitcoin, when everything was an experiment, and very few people believed the project would last, coins were created and forgotten, with the same casualness that people sometimes forget a cup of tea on the windowsill. A developer might run the mining program for fun, watch a few coins appear like tiny sparks on the screen, shrug, and close the laptop. The value wasn't symbolic or financial back then. It was simply curious. A little digital trinket, a puzzle piece from a game no one fully understood. Some people mined on computers they had built themselves from old spare parts. Fans humming, screens glowing softly at midnight, rooms lit only by the light of the monitor. They mined for an hour,
maybe two, then turned everything off and went on with their lives. Years later, when Bitcoin had a price and the world began to pay attention, those forgotten coins were still on the blockchain, right where they had always been. But the keys were gone, lost to time, misplaced during a move, buried in an old hard drive, or written on a piece of paper that someone threw away without thinking. In a way, these coins became the fossils of the digital world, traces of people who were there in the beginning, even if they no longer remember being part of it. Some were lost because someone typed a password they were sure they would remember forever, only to forget it a week later. Some because a computer failed, in the quiet, unceremonious way electronics sometimes do. And some because people passed away, leaving behind wallets that no one else even knew existed. It sounds sad at first, but if you sit with the thought for a moment, really sit with it, you may notice there's something nearly poetic about it. Unlike the physical world, where lost objects rust or crumble or decay, the blockchain keeps everything exactly as it was. Nothing disappears. Nothing is erased. Those unreachable coins won't be spent, but they also won't fade. They remain like lanterns, left glowing in the distance long after the traveler has moved on. There's a story people sometimes tell about a miner who created thousands of Bitcoins in 2009 on an old computer in a dusty attic. He stopped because he thought the project was amusing, but ultimately pointless. Years later, when Bitcoin was worth real money, he went back to look for the hard drive and realized it had been thrown away. But in the quiet privacy of bedtime, it doesn't feel like a tragedy. It feels like something gentler, like an unopened letter that was never meant to be read. Another story tells of tiny amounts of Bitcoin, fractions of a coin, not enough for anyone to worry about, sent to unreachable addresses by accident or experimentation. Stray little units of value lost in corners of the blockchain where no human hands can retrieve them. But these aren't tragedies either. They are simply part of the landscape, like shells scattered on the shore, or stars you can see but will never touch. Even now, millions of coins sit unmoving on the chain, not trapped, not broken, just resting in a kind of infinite pause. Some people call it digital loss, but you might also call it a reminder that humans and technology do not move at the same pace. We forget. We get busy. We change computers, change homes, change our lives. But the blockchain remembers every tiny imprint we leave behind. Not perfectly, not emotionally, just faithfully. If you're still awake, think for a moment about how unusual it is for something man-made to keep such perfect stillness. A place where nothing is ever truly gone, but also never reclaimed. A kind of digital museum that no one intended to build. And if your eyes are starting to close, that's all right. This story, like the coins it describes, isn't going anywhere. Each forgotten wallet, each unreachable key, each tiny fragment of a transaction sits quietly in the chain, a gentle echo of the people who touched this world before it became noisy. In the next story, we'll drift into something lighter, something silly, actually. A strange little animation that danced its way across early computer screens and somehow became one of the first memes in history. But for now, if you feel yourself drifting, just let the story fade like a soft tide returning to the night.
How a strange little animation became the internet's first meme. Before blockchains, before meme coins, before anyone used the word viral, the internet had a different kind of magic, a softer magic, a kind that made people stop whatever they were doing, lean closer to their screen, and wonder, what on earth am I looking at? It all began with a baby, a chubby, wobbly little digital baby dancing. If that sounds odd, that's because it was odd. Very odd. But back in the mid-1990s, when most computers still hummed like sleepy refrigerators, and the internet felt more like a quiet neighborhood than a global city, a strange dancing baby was enough to make the whole online world smile. And tonight, with your eyes slowly growing heavy, let's drift back to that gentler time. The dancing baby didn't look realistic, not even close. Its proportions were unusual. Its joints moved like someone had taught a doll to wiggle with great determination, and the expression on its face was somewhere between curious and slightly confused. But that was part of the charm. People today are used to beautiful animation, smooth graphics, and special effects that sparkle. But in 1996, a 3D rendered baby doing a funny dance felt like seeing a living creature inside your computer, a tiny visitor from a world made of pixels. Imagine someone working late at night, their room lit only by the glow of a CRT monitor, when suddenly this little dancing figure appears on the screen, wiggling happily, as if it had been waiting there the whole time. It was impossible not to laugh, impossible not to share. And that's exactly what happened. Emails flew back and forth. Office workers showed it to their co-workers. Someone added music. Someone else added captions. People saved it on floppy disks and carried it to friends like a secret treasure. This baby danced its way through the early internet with more enthusiasm than it had polygons. But the strange part is this: no one meant to create a meme. No one was trying to go viral. There was no marketing plan, no analytics dashboard, no strategy meeting. Just pure, accidental joy. The creators were experimenting with early 3D modeling tools, playing, exploring the way children doodle in the margins of a notebook. The baby was a test animation, a technical demonstration that somehow slipped away from its creators and found its own destiny.
And in a world where everything now feels planned and optimized and measured, there's something beautifully innocent about that kind of accident. It reminds us that the early internet wasn't built on perfection. It wasn't built on influencers or algorithms or growth strategies. It was built on curiosity, on small, silly moments, on people saying, "Look at this funny thing I found." As the baby spread, it became something larger, a cultural moment, a shared joke among strangers across the world who might never speak to each other, but who recognized the same dance, the same wobble, the same slightly chaotic charm. And if your eyes are beginning to grow heavy now, you might find something comforting about that early digital innocence. Before markets, before speculation, before the endless noise, there was simply a baby who wanted to dance. Looking back, it's easy to see how the dancing baby became a kind of ancestor to today's internet memes and eventually to meme coins and blockchain culture. Not because it was valuable, not because it was high quality, but because it was shared. Because it brought people together in laughter and confusion and delight. And maybe that's why the memory of it still feels warm. It came from a time when digital life was slower, softer, filled with wonder instead of urgency. A time when the internet felt like a group of friends discovering strange treasures in a dusty attic. A time when anything could become famous, not because someone pushed it to fame, but because the world simply found it charming. If you're still awake, take a moment to imagine that tiny baby doing its determined little wiggle in the quiet of your mind. Silly, unnecessary, but somehow calming. Because even our most complicated technologies, the ones involving cryptography and decentralized networks and thousands of lines of code, grew from a culture that once celebrated a dancing cartoon baby. In a strange way, the dancing baby teaches us that the internet is always, at its heart, human. It loves to laugh, it loves to share, it loves the unusual, the imperfect, the surprising. And maybe, just maybe, that's why it continues to feel like a place where anything can begin. When you're ready, we'll drift into our next story. One that starts quietly with a mysterious name typed into the soft glow of a late-night screen. But if sleep finds you before then, that's perfectly all right. Stories wait. They always do.
There are moments in history that don't feel important at first. They don't arrive with celebration or fireworks. No headlines, no crowds. Just a quiet message floating into the world like a feather carried by a slow wind. Satoshi Nakamoto entered history that way. Not with a speech, not with a company announcement, not with a bold prediction of changing the world. Just an email, simple, calm, and almost shy. It was sent to a small cryptography mailing list, a place where researchers and hobbyists shared unusual ideas that rarely reached the wider world. People there were used to strange proposals, new encryption schemes, mathematical curiosities, sometimes dreams that made sense only to their authors. So when a message titled Bitcoin P2P eCash paper appeared in the list, no one knew that a new chapter of the digital age was unfolding quietly in plain text. The email was polite, measured, warm in a gentle, technical way. Satoshi explained Bitcoin as if describing something obvious, like a small machine sitting on a desk whose inner workings were perfectly clear in their mind. The tone wasn't proud, but steady, like someone holding a lantern in a dark room, inviting others to step closer. There was no urgency, no attempt to impress, just clarity. And that's what made it feel different. Some people responded with curiosity. Some offered small critiques. Some didn't pay attention at all. After all, mailing lists were full of short-lived ideas, interesting today, forgotten tomorrow. But Satoshi stayed. They answered questions with patience, never sounding frustrated or defensive or tired of explaining the same concept again. When someone misunderstood a technical detail, Satoshi replied with gentle precision. "I think you may have missed a part of the design. Let me explain." Soft, kind, and helpful. It's rare to find that tone in technical discussions, especially on the internet. Sometimes, late at night, when people read those archived emails, they say they can almost hear Satoshi's voice through the screen. Not the literal voice, of course, but the presence. Quiet, steady, thoughtful. Someone who cared more about the idea than about themselves. Before long, the white paper appeared. Just 9 pages, simple diagrams, plain language. No marketing, no grand philosophy, no drama. If you didn't know better, you might think it was written by someone explaining a household appliance. Straightforward, practical, focused on the mechanism rather than the myth. Yet between those lines was something extraordinary. A proposal for money that belonged to no country, no corporation, no central authority. Money that anyone could verify. Money that no one could rewrite. Money that lived in an open ledger, like a river of numbers flowing through time. Even now, reading the white paper feels strangely calming. It doesn't try to convince you. It just is, like a quiet stone placed gently on the ground. Some people on the mailing list recognized its potential the moment they read it. Others were doubtful. That's the nature of new ideas. They enter softly and only later reveal their shape. But Satoshi didn't push, didn't argue, didn't defend the idea with emotion. Instead, they offered more explanations, more clarifications,
more patient replies, as if saying, "Here is something I made. If it's useful, it will live. If not, that's all right too." There was humility in that, a softness rarely associated with world-changing inventions. And then came the software. At first, only a handful of people downloaded it, mostly those who were curious or simply had time to explore strange new tools on a quiet weekend afternoon. Imagine opening the Bitcoin program for the first time in 2009. The interface was simple, almost plain, nothing flashy, nothing that hinted at the future unfolding beneath it. You clicked Start, and your computer began solving puzzles, tiny mathematical problems that created new blocks for the chain. Back then, mining wasn't a competition. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't even interesting to most people. It felt like watching a screensaver only you understood. Coins appeared slowly, like little seeds sprouting in soil you weren't sure would ever grow anything. Some people mined a few coins and forgot about them. Some deleted the software. Some kept playing with it like a toy. Through it all, Satoshi remained in the background, answering questions, fixing bugs, writing small messages filled with quiet gratitude. If you picture them during that time, you might imagine someone sitting alone in a dim room lit by a monitor, typing gently, thinking carefully, refining the code with peaceful concentration. The world was still asleep to what Bitcoin would become. But Satoshi already saw the road ahead. Not the price, not the fame, not the markets. Just the idea that people could share a ledger without needing to trust one another, because the system itself would hold the trust. It wasn't a loud revolution, it was a soft one. A seed planted quietly in the soil of the internet. And like many seeds, its beginning was humble, almost invisible. If you're still awake, take a moment to imagine that mailing list, just a small group of people unaware that the most influential invention of their generation had just walked in politely and taken a seat at the edge of a gathering. There was no fanfare, no announcement, no spotlight, just Satoshi Nakamoto arriving softly, like a quiet guest at the edge of a gathering, waiting patiently to see if anyone would be willing to hear a new kind of story. In the next part, we'll drift deeper into Satoshi's work, how they built Bitcoin block by block, day by day, with a kind of gentle dedication that feels almost ancient. But for now, let this first footprint settle in your mind like a soft imprint on fresh snow.
When Bitcoin finally began to grow, slowly, quietly, like a small lantern glowing in a forest, Satoshi worked in a way that felt almost meditative. Most of us imagine builders as loud, energetic people who move fast and talk faster. But Satoshi was the opposite. their presence on the early forums was gentle, patient, and unusually calm. If you scroll through those messages today, it feels like watching someone build a ship in a bottle. Careful hands, steady movements, no wasted words. The early Bitcoin software was far from perfect. It had bugs, odd behaviors, little quirks that only appear when something new is handled for the first time. But Satoshi fixed them one by one, with a kind of quiet dedication that has become rare in the digital age. Someone might post a late-night question, confused about how blocks were formed or why a transaction behaved strangely, and Satoshi would respond not with frustration, but with gentle clarity. Here's what's happening behind the scenes. This part of the code will be improved soon. Thank you for noticing this. Every reply felt like a soft guiding hand on the shoulder of a wandering traveler. In those days, Bitcoin was not a marketplace, or an investment, or a movement. It was an odd little experiment shared by a group of curious strangers. Most of them had full-time jobs. Some had never met another supporter in real life. Many didn't fully understand what Bitcoin was trying to become. But Satoshi did. Not because they predicted price or markets or global adoption, but because they could see the internal harmony of the system, the mathematical rhythm that made everything tick. For Satoshi, Bitcoin wasn't a product, it was a craft, something to be shaped with the precision of a watchmaker and the quiet pride of an artist who works alone long after everyone else has gone to sleep. Picture Satoshi in those early years. A dimly lit room, the soft hum of a computer tower, coffee cooling beside the keyboard, lines of code scrolling on the screen like gentle waves. Outside, the world slept. Inside, a new kind of world was being built, block by block. Mining was still simple then. No warehouses of machines, no roaring fans, just personal computers ticking away like clocks as they solved puzzles that added bricks to the digital ledger. And when something went wrong, a stalled block, a fork that drifted off like a branch in a river, a strange behavior deep in the protocol, Satoshi approached it the way a calm gardener approaches a crooked stem. Not with panic, not with force, just understanding. A small adjustment here, a line rewritten there, a quiet note to the community. This should fix the issue. There's a softness to Satoshi's collaboration with others that feels almost old-fashioned. Someone would propose an idea, someone else would disagree. A third person might misunderstand the entire conversation, and Satoshi, instead of shutting things down, would patiently fold each perspective into the discussion, never dismissive, never boastful, never claiming authority. Even though, of course, they were the only person in the world who truly understood the whole system at the time. They had every reason to sound superior. They never did. One of the most touching aspects of Satoshi's early work was how they treated praise. People would thank them for inventing something remarkable,
for building something entirely new, and Satoshi's replies were simple. Thank you. I hope others will improve it. There is still much to do. No celebration, no spotlight, no hint that they believed they had changed the world. They behaved more like a caretaker than a founder, someone tending to a small flame they hoped others would carry forward. Even Bitcoin's earliest problems felt gentle through Satoshi's voice. A user would accidentally corrupt their wallet and lose their coins. Another would ask why the network felt slow that day. Someone else would question the future of the project. Each time, Satoshi offered comfort without ever promising success. It will take time. We are still discovering what works. Thank you for your patience. It was a tone you might expect from a wise neighbor or an older friend helping you fix something on your first attempt. Never rushed, never irritated, always there, quietly holding up the structure in the background. If you're still awake, you might imagine those early days as a warm little workshop tucked away on the edge of the internet. A handful of curious people wander in, look around, ask questions, test new tools, and sometimes break them. And there in the corner is Satoshi, working steadily, smiling gently at the mistakes, encouraging the progress, never raising his voice, never demanding credit, just building, brick by brick, block by block, line by line, the quiet architect of something no one yet realized would reshape the world. In the next part, we'll talk about the softest moment of all, the moment when Satoshi stepped away and let the community walk forward alone. But for now, if your eyelids feel heavy, you can let them close. This story isn't going anywhere.
Every story has a moment when the light begins to fade. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just gently, the way the sky dims after sunset. Even though you didn't notice the exact moment, day became night. Satoshi's departure felt like that. There was no announcement, no emotional farewell, no speech about what Bitcoin meant or where it should go next. Just a slow quieting, like footsteps softening as someone walks down a long hallway. After years of writing code, answering questions, adjusting tiny details in the protocol, and helping strangers understand a new and delicate system, Satoshi began to type less. Replies grew shorter, more spaced out, a little further between each message, like waves falling into a calmer rhythm. At first, no one thought much of it. People get busy, they rest, they disappear for a few days and come back with new ideas. Bitcoin was growing now. Other developers were helping. The world was beginning to notice. But behind all the activity, Satoshi was slowly stepping away from the center of the room they had built with their own hands. Then came the message, soft, uneventful, almost forgettable in its simplicity. I've moved on to other things. Just that. No explanation, no hint, no clue of what those other things were. It sounded like someone politely excusing themselves from a dinner table, not someone leaving a creation that would reshape economies and spark global movements.
But perhaps that simplicity was exactly the point. Satoshi never acted like someone seeking recognition. They never signed their name with a flourish, never claimed leadership, never tried to become a symbol. They had always been, from the very beginning, a quiet guest in the corner, happy to let others take the spotlight. And now they were simply completing the quietest exit imaginable. After that message, Satoshi sent a few more small notes, brief replies, a final confirmation or two, and then silence. Days passed, weeks, months. Eventually, people realized they were gone. The email account stopped responding. The forum profile went still. No updates, no check-ins, no more guidance. Just absence. Soft, complete, and strangely peaceful. Many people tried to guess what happened. Some believed Satoshi was protecting their identity. Others thought they were avoiding pressure as Bitcoin grew too fast. Others spun wild theories that stretched across continents and decades. But none of those theories feel appropriate in the quiet of night. When you listen with a softer heart, the disappearance feels simpler. A person finished their work, and when it was time, they put away their tools, closed the door behind them, and walked on. No grand finale, no bow, no applause. Just a gentle departure befitting someone who never wanted fame in the first place. In a way, Satoshi's choice created the final piece of Bitcoin's design. By leaving, they removed the founder's shadow, the central authority that Bitcoin itself was built to eliminate. Their absence was the last gift. Bitcoin could now belong to everyone because it no longer belonged to anyone. Developers debated, communities split and rejoined, markets rose and fell. New voices appeared, each trying to interpret the original vision. But Satoshi never returned to correct anyone, never appeared to settle arguments, never resurfaced to influence the future. It was as if the inventor had stepped into a forest that swallowed all footprints behind them. Sometimes, late at night, people imagine Satoshi somewhere in the world, older now, perhaps, living a quiet life far from the noise their invention created. Maybe reading the news with amusement, maybe not reading it at all. Maybe they smile when they see Bitcoin discussed in places they never imagined. Maybe they shake their head at the arguments, or the speculation, or the endless debates. Or maybe, and this thought has a certain softness to it, maybe they truly did move on. And that's all right. Because ideas, once released, have lives of their own. If you're still awake, think about how rare it is for someone to create something world-changing and then walk away without looking back. Most people would hold on. Most would want recognition. Most would want to guide the story forever. Satoshi simply let go, like a parent releasing a small paper boat into a river, watching it drift for a moment, and then turning away so it can follow the current on its own. There is something deeply peaceful in that gesture, something that fits perfectly with the tone of tonight, soft, unhurried, and quietly profound. In a moment, we'll move on to the final story of the night, a story about Mt. Gox and the growing pains of a young digital world. But for now, If your eyes are closing, you can rest. The inventor has already walked away, and the world they built continues gently on its path, block by block, moment by moment, carried forward by countless hands they never met.
Long before Bitcoin had a global presence, before exchanges became sleek apps with bright charts and security audits, there was a website with a name that sounded almost playful: Mt. Gox. If you came to crypto later, the name might feel mysterious, like a hidden mountain from a fantasy novel, but its origins were far more human. It began as a platform for trading Magic the Gathering cards, a hobby site for people who loved dragons and spells and colorful pieces of cardboard with imaginative artwork. Nothing about it suggested finance. Nothing about it hinted at the future. And yet, almost by accident, Mt. Gox grew into the world's largest Bitcoin exchange. It's funny, in a gentle way, how beginnings can be so wildly mismatched with what comes later. In those early years, the Bitcoin community was small, a scattered constellation of curious dreamers and tinkerers working late at night on machines that hummed softly in bedrooms and basements. When people needed a place to trade coins, there were few options. So, Mt. Gox, imperfect and humble as it was, became the meeting place. It wasn't polished. It wasn't corporate. It wasn't built for millions. It felt more like a crowded attic than a financial institution, full of improvised solutions, patched together features, and hallways that creaked under growing weight. And yet, in that attic, countless people touched Bitcoin for the very first time. Someone bought their first tiny fraction. Someone else sold coins they had mined on a dusty laptop. Someone forgot their password. Someone celebrated a small gain. Someone cursed a small loss. The website held all of these moments, clumsy, hopeful, beautiful in their own unpolished way. For a while, Mt. Gox managed surprisingly well. The world was still small then. The traffic was manageable. The mistakes were recoverable. But Bitcoin didn't stay small for long. Every day, more people arrived, more trades, more questions, more pressure. The attic began to groan. You might imagine a single overworked server sighing under the weight of a world it was never meant to hold. Little errors appeared, a withdrawal delayed here, a mismatch in numbers there, support tickets piling up like unopened letters in a shoebox. At first, the community brushed these things aside. Growing pains, they said. We're still early. Everything is experimental. And they were right. But even experiments have limits. Eventually, those small cracks widened. Not dramatically, but slowly, quietly, in a way that feels almost tender when viewed from a distance. Systems buckled, processes broke, confusion spread, and one day, Mt. Gox, this fragile, accidental giant, simply could not hold itself together anymore. The collapse echoed around the world, but here, in the softness of a bedtime story, there is no need to relive the noise.
Instead, we can look at Mt. Gox the way we look at an old wooden bridge that carried travelers for years before giving way. Not with blame, but with understanding. It wasn't built for the weight. No one knew how heavy the future would become. No one expected a hobby project to become the center of a financial revolution. Mt. Gox didn't fall because it was malicious. It fell because it was overwhelmed, because it was first, because it was alone at a time when no structure existed to support what Bitcoin would eventually become. If you're still awake, think of Mt. Gox as a chapter from a coming-of-age story. Bitcoin was young then, a child taking its early steps, tripping over its own feet, learning the hard way that the world beyond the doorstep can be rough and complicated. Mt. Gox was part of that childhood, a messy, imperfect, but necessary part. It taught the community what could go wrong. It forced people to build systems that were safer and kinder and more prepared. And though it ended quietly and sadly, its fall shaped the path that millions walk today. Sometimes, when people recall Mt. Gox, they focus on the chaos, the numbers, the headlines. But late at night, when the noise fades and the room grows still, the story feels different. It becomes a reminder that great things often grow from uncertain beginnings, that even in failure there is wisdom, that even in collapse there is a strange kind of peace. Because Mt. Gox, with all its fragility, helped Bitcoin grow up. It pushed the community to build stronger foundations. It showed everyone that trust needed to be earned and that systems built on hope alone could not carry the future. In a way, Mt. Gox stepped aside so that sturdier platforms could rise. It was a bridge that served its time, and then, gracefully, it left the stage.
If your eyes are drifting closed now, you can rest. We're nearing the end of tonight's stories. And like Mt. Gox, even endings don't have to be loud. Sometimes they are simply a breath, a pause, a quiet chapter closing, so the next one can begin. In a moment, we'll turn to the final page, a soft ending to send you gently into sleep.
We've reached the quiet end of tonight's stories. We've wandered through lost coins, resting forever on forgotten keys. Through a strange little dancing baby that wiggled its way into internet history. Through the soft, patient footsteps of Satoshi Nakamoto. And through the fragile rise and fall of Mt. Gox, that early accidental giant of a brand new world. All of these stories, different as they are, share a certain stillness when viewed from the softness of night. They remind us that technology, for all its speed and noise during the day, has a quiet side too, a side filled with accidents, curiosity, and people simply doing their best in moments no one realized would someday matter. The beginnings were messy. The paths were uncertain, but they were human. in the gentlest sense of the word. And now, as the room settles and the night deepens around you, you don't need to hold on to any part of the story. You can let it drift, the way pages close softly after reading a chapter you enjoyed. Your breath can slow. Your thoughts can loosen their grip. The world outside your window can fade into a soft blur. If sleep is already pulling at you, let it. There's nothing left to do tonight. No decisions, no tension, no urgency. Just rest. And if you're still awake, that's all right too. You can float here a little longer in this gentle space between thinking and dreaming. Thank you for spending this quiet time with me. Thank you for listening to these soft little stories from the early days of a strange, beautiful digital universe. When you're ready, whether it's now or a few breaths from now, you can let the night close around you like a warm blanket. And perhaps somewhere in the distance, a new story is already waiting for another quiet evening. For now, good night and sleep well.